The Decameron by Giovanni Boccaccio. It is a story about 10 young people, 7 women and 3 men, flee plague-stricken Florence to a delightful villa in nearby Fiesole. Each rules for a day and sets stipulations for the daily tales to be told by all participants, resulting in a collection of 100 pieces. Each day ends with a canzone or a song, and some of these represent Boccaccio's finest poetry. The era of the literature. The Decameron, or 10 Days, is a collection of tales compiled between 1348 and 1353 CE. Some resources believe that it was published in 1353. The work is regarded as a masterpiece of classical Italian prose. While romantic in tone and form, it breaks from medieval sensibility in its insistence on the human ability to overcome, even exploit, fortune. Getting to know Boccaccio, he was an Italian poet, writer, and scholar born in 1313 in Tuscany. He spent his childhood in Florence. His most famous and influential work is the Decameron. Writing in the vernacular and not Latin, Boccaccio helped promote the use of Tuscan as a legitimate language for poetic literature. Boccaccio turned more to Latin and studies of classical literature, composing an influential genealogy of Roman and Greek mythology, writing a biography of Dante Alighieri, and giving public lectures on that writer's works. He died in December 21, 1375, aged 62 in Certaldo, Republic of Florence. It would appear that he suffered over the last 3 years of his life from hepatic and cardiac failure, conditions that resulted in edema and potentially even hepatic carcinoma. The historical significance of Boccaccio's Decameron. The Decameron is viewed as Boccaccio's masterpiece and is generally regarded as the work that cemented his reputation as the founder of Italian prose literature. The earthiness of human experience expressed in an accessible style of Italian vernacular prose was a significant divergence from the formulaic models for plot and character and transcendental idealism that dominated European writing during this period. The Decameron is written as framed narrative, which is a literary compositional technique that allows various different stories to be related within a previously introduced main story. While primarily a work of fiction, the introduction to the Decameron has emerged as an important historical record of the physical, psychological, and social effects of the aggressive spread of the previously unknown Yersinia pestis bacteria. It provides a significant philosophical insight into the medieval psyche as Europe faced the alarming and unprecedented epidemic of the 1348 Black Plague. The themes of the Decameron. Love. Love is a force of nature, something that cannot be reasoned with nor denied. In the courtly love stories of the medieval period, love was usually chaste and not consummated. The gentleman worshipped the lady from afar, usually doing great deeds in her honor. Boccaccio ultimately doesn't believe in this. His love is earthy, natural, and nearly always consummated. Women and their place in society is one aspect of this change in class hierarchy. Most women lacked power and position and were usually relegated to cementing political alliances with their bodies through marriage. In the group, however, Pampinea is the leader, and the equality between the men and the women is real. Religion. Religion in medieval Europe was widespread. Catholicism was the order of the day, and the Pope ruled in Rome. Although the plague may have upset the course of daily life, the church and religious services went on as best they could. The group meets up at a church for services and continue to worship even while on their trip outside of Florence, taking several breaks in the storytelling for religious observance. Trickery and wit. Trickery plays an important part in nearly all of the stories in the Decameron. It is present in practically all of the stories, either through pranks, disguises, lies, magic, and misdirection. People use costumes to appear wealthy for the purpose of obtaining money or sex. New identities are often created and discarded like clothing. Sex. Some commentators think that at its heart, the Decameron is a story of how priests and women used their wits to get sexual satisfaction from the people they're in lust with. Despite the fact that the overriding moral virtue in the medieval era was chastity, John Charles Nelson in his essay Love and Sex in the Decameron sums it up nicely. Friendship. Boccaccio tells us in his introduction that he writes these tales to console ladies in love, because he knows the pain of lost love. In a way, the Decameron can be considered a gesture of friendship to the lovelorn ladies. Lies and deceit. Boccaccio proves to us that deception in its many forms makes for great stories. He's given us 2 full days dedicated to lies and pranks, and has created an entire comedic cast of characters dedicated to pranking the gullible. The stories are brimming with masks, disguises, fake magic, and misdirection. That's to say nothing of the lovers and clergymen who will do and say anything to satisfy their desires. Suffering. Once you've become involved in the lively stories of the Decameron, it's easy to forget the intense suffering that led the group to leave Florence and retreat into a parallel universe. If you can imagine the horror, sickness, decay, bodily suffering, and loneliness that would have been the daily reality during the plague years, you'll understand how the move to a vision of psychological and physical preservation. Characterization. Pompineia, the eldest of the 7 ladies of the group. She is level-headed, temperate in her behavior and manner, and seems the most mature of the group. She says she has often been in love. Philomena. Philomena is the one to advise caution when following Pompineia's idea to leave the city, and suggest they take a guide to keep the company from becoming quarrelsome. She is discerning and discreet. Nephele. Nephele is 18 and inexperienced. She is in love with one of the 3 men in the group. She suggests observing the religious days and takes the young women of the group to the Valley of the Ladies. She seems wise for her years. Philostrato. Philostrato suffers betrayal and disappointment in love, possibly with one of the young women in the group. Because of his disappointments, he is fairly unpleasant to be around and chooses stories with unhappy endings as his theme. Fiammetta. Fiammetta has a generous nature and is anxious to be in love, although she fears the pain of heartbreak. It is possible she was modeled after Boccaccio's real-life Fiammetta, whom he fell in love with when he was a young man. Elisa. Elisa is the one who decides the theme of her stories will be about people using their wit to overcome hardship. Dioneo. Dioneo is the wittiest and most self-confident of the 3 young men. His stories almost always have sexual content and body humor. He tells the final story of each day and only loosely subscribes to the themes of the day. Loretta is extremely pious, attempts to find an honorable way to await the end of the plague. One of the women of the upper class who do not trust themselves to make a perilous journey alone. Emilia is a shy, beautiful young woman who has never been in love before. She is self-confident and enjoys singing and dancing. Panfilo is the king in 10th day, who asks for stories where people have acted generously for love. The setting and the mood of the Decameron. The story begins in Florence, Italy around 1348, the time of an outbreak of the plague and at the dawn of the Italian Renaissance. As for the mood, Boccaccio gives a grim description of the city as it's gripped by the epidemic. Houses emptied of occupants, dead bodies rotting in the streets, bodies piled on boards and brought to burial in sixes and sevens to be dumped in mass graves. The social order has completely broken down and it's every man for himself in an effort to survive. Tone. The tone of the Decameron alternates between satirical and humor, although the stories each have their own emotional tone. Some laugh out loud, funny and ironic. Much of the humor comes from the contrast between the high-mindedness of the characters in the stories and the way they succumb to their basic instincts. Summary of the plot. In the preface of the Decameron, author Giovanni Boccaccio provides a brief explanation of why he wrote the Decameron and what it means to him. As the book begins, Florence has been hit hard by the Black Death. 7 women, ages 18 to 28, meet at the recently built Church of Santa Maria Novella. The eldest, Pampinea, suggests a plan to escape the city for the relative safety of the countryside. By chance, 3 handsome young men arrive at the church, and the group decides to head to a palazzo, a large villa with gardens in the outskirts of Florence. While they are staying there, each member of the group, or the brigata, will be monarch for one day. This king or queen will direct the entertainment, food, and all aspects of their lives, and will choose a theme for the stories to be told that day. Each member of the group will tell 1 story per day. 10 stories will each be told over the course of 10 days for a total of 100. Pampinea, queen in first day, chooses an open theme where the stories can be about anything. Philomena, queen in second day, chooses tales in which the characters overcome misfortunes to attain happiness. Nephile, the queen in third day, suggests they skip both Friday and Saturday, the days of religious observance, and reconvene on Sunday. She requests stories that showcase ingenuity. Philostrato, the king in fourth day, is interrupted by Boccaccio himself, who tells a story of his own in response to his critics who claim he cares too much for women and their entertainment. Philostrato chooses stories of love that end unhappily for his theme. Fiammetta, queen in fifth day, chooses as her theme stories about lovers who overcome misfortune. Elisa, queen in sixth day, she decides the theme shall be stories about people using their wit to overcome hardship. Dioneo, king in seventh day, calls for stories in which wives fool their husbands. Loretta follows Philomena's example. On Sunday, the group tells stories where people trick others, not just wives tricking their husbands. Emilia, queen in ninth day, decides to allow the group a day to tell whatever stories they wish. And Panfilo, the king in 10th day, ask for stories where people have acted generously for love. In his author's conclusion, Boccaccio addresses some of the criticisms he expects to receive. He ends hoping the women reading enjoyed his tales and they think fondly of him. The moral of the Decameron. The moral base of the Decameron is nature. The storytellers strongly suggest this in several cases and from different point of views. Those who oppose themselves to the law of nature are bound to failure and also, perhaps, to causing great harm.